This is Rosen Institute's Your Law Firm, where Lee Rosen and Ned Days cover management, marketing, finance, and new technologies for building the practice you deserve. Here's Lee Rosen.
It's good to be with you today from Xi'an, China, which is the city closest to the site of the terracotta warrior sculptures that were accidentally discovered here back in 1974. The now iconic site houses about 8,000 warriors. About 1,200 of them have been unearthed and reassembled for the display, and they are open for tourists to look at, and it is absolutely amazing to see. We have visited a lot of archaeology sites on our travels around the world, but this one is off the charts. It's really next level. It's quite something to see, and it's totally worth the trip to Xi'an. Xi'an is significant for more reasons than just the terracotta warriors. It's also the eastern terminus of the Silk Road. It's absolutely filled with history. We walked much of the 14-kilometer city wall yesterday, and this city of about 9 million people, it just oozes history.
It's time for your tech tip. Picking the right software is one of those decisions a lot of lawyers hate. They worry they're making the wrong choice and they'll be locked into a contract, or figure out a month after signing up that there is a better option and be stuck, or face dealing with painful migrations. But there are an increasing number of services popping up under the banner of low-code or no-code that promise to allow you to build custom apps and interfaces on top of your own data so that you and your team can operate in the way that's best suited to the way your practice runs. The popular workflow automation tool Zapier has recently introduced additional features like Zapier interfaces and Zapier tables as a basic but promising way to start turning what used to be simply a headless workflow into something more like a custom internal app for your team. But there are also dedicated low-code and no-code app builders like Bubble.io and GlideApps.com that offer much more substantial functionality for creating internal forms, apps, portals, and more. And it's these app builders in particular that I want to focus on, because I think they present an interesting opportunity to get custom software that works in exactly the way that makes sense for your practice without the normal headaches of custom development, with a few caveats. In broad strokes, these platforms give you the ability to create web apps that can use either their own databases as a backend or data that you already have in Google Sheets, Excel 365, Airtable, or other spreadsheet and database platforms. You get building blocks for creating forms and interfaces, the ability to set up permissions and access for users on your team, and to keep data in sync between the apps you build and the spreadsheets and even third-party tools. The idea is that you are building custom solutions and software for internal use that your team can use to update your backend data and trigger automations and workflows based on those updates. And it's not just third-party options like Bubble and Glide that I mentioned before. Google's App Sheet and Microsoft's Power Apps offer similar functionality and, unsurprisingly, are tightly integrated with the rest of your data in their respective ecosystems. Now, the somewhat inflated promise of these no-code and low-code tools is that anyone can be up and running in a matter of minutes with custom-tailored solutions that will make you infinitely more productive. The reality, as is the case with any software, isn't quite so rosy, and as with just about anything along these lines, I'm generally going to recommend that you hire somebody to build these applications for you, even though they're substantially easier than traditional custom coding. The benefit of being on one of these app-building platforms is that there are guide rails and a common set of tools. If you've ever had even the tiniest custom tool built for you by a developer, and you then had to hand the project off to someone else for an update, you will know that every single time you are told that the last guy had no idea what he was doing and it needs to be rebuilt from scratch. With a no-code tool, you aren't running the risk of losing access to your code or breaking updates or failing servers. Everything is hosted for you and customizations are within the confines of the platform. So the next contractor has no incentive to start from the ground up. So the real question we need answered is, should you be using one of these no-code platforms to build internal software and tools for your practice? And if so, what software should it be replacing? If you are using an off-the-shelf practice management system right now, these are not going to come close to replacing the legal-specific features, case tracking, and billing functionality of something like Clio, Lawmatics, or Practice Panther. If you're very particular about how you want things handled and very, very concerned with making sure that things are done exactly your way, being able to roll your own solution with a no-code or low-code tool instead of using something off the shelf probably sounds very appealing. Nearly everyone I talk to says something along the lines of, we use Clio, but I hate the way it does X, or we use Lawmatics, but I hate the way it does Y. You do have the flexibility to do things the way you want them done in these platforms, but at least as of right now, these are not going to give you the low-level access to build exactly the widgets and functionality you're after. And it's also worth keeping in mind that standardized ways of approaching tasks like case management often become the standard for a reason. Sometimes it's because it's more effective than what we come up with by winging it. Years ago, I thought it was a good idea to build the perfect electric guitar. I commissioned parts from a company that will build necks and bodies to your specifications. I picked out the perfect specimens of exotic wood, a non-standard size for just about everything. I had some guy in Oregon hand-wind pickups with special magnets because I read a lot of internet forums and clearly knew better than the pros how this should be done, and the result was a giant boat anchor monstrosity. Just because it's our way doesn't mean it's a good way. Having too much control isn't always a good thing. Now, two areas where I do think these tools become more interesting are number one, for solos or small firms who are right now essentially happy enough keeping track of a small client list in a spreadsheet. You can basically start building interfaces and tools on top of that information right away. And with Google AppSheet or Microsoft Power Apps, it's already integrated with the data and ecosystem you're in all day anyway. And number two is for medium to larger size practices. I know for a fact that there are processes and projects happening in hidden documents and spreadsheets that should be happening in your practice management or marketing automation or task management software, but aren't for whatever reason. At our firm, the intake team had a secret spreadsheet that they used for tracking potential client follow-up information, and then they copied that information into our CRM after the fact instead of using the tools that we had built for that purpose. I had to threaten them with public humiliation for that to end, but I kind of understood where they were coming from. The process in our CRM was a little clunky, and fixing things was not only a chore, but it required our $150 an hour Salesforce developer anytime we needed to so much as change the name on a field. There's stuff like that that's going on in your firm too, either processes that are happening only because someone has the institutional knowledge in his or her head, or the data is living somewhere outside of where it should be because that's the more convenient option. These kinds of projects are ripe for being turned into a more ergonomic solution with a no-code app builder that can both sit on top of the spreadsheets the team is using and sync to third-party data sources or dashboards where the information is actually needed. As for which of these platforms is going to work best, each has its strengths and weaknesses. Standalone services like Bubble and Glide tend to be easier to figure out and get started with when it comes to building tools compared to Google and Microsoft's offerings. They also offer integrations with more data sources if you want to use something like Airtable or Stripe or HubSpot. But keep in mind, you probably shouldn't be the one building these tools anyway, so ease of getting started from the builder perspective isn't necessarily a priority. And those standalone options are more expensive. At least I think they are. It's a little difficult to compare apples to apples with any of these services. The way each of them bill is a little different and run from flat rates per user to weird formulas based on the number of database updates and accounts and other variables. But Microsoft's offering may already be bundled depending on your 365 tier, and Google's start at about $5 per month per user, whereas the service tier at which Glide starts to be usable for even small firms with a few employees and a couple of apps is about $200 per month. So while you probably aren't going to rewrite Slack or Monday.com in one of these tools, they do present an interesting option to start creating processes and systems that used to require manual entry and may end up replacing some of the headless workflows that you've built elsewhere. I'm Ned Days, and that's your tech tip.
And now for your moment of concise advice. There is a myth out there. It's a comforting myth, but it's a myth nonetheless. It's the idea that if you work smart enough, if you're clever enough, that you can sidestep the sacrifices on the way to your success. The idea is that if you plan perfectly, you can get the reward without the pain. But sadly, I'm here to tell you that that's just not true. It really is a myth. Over the years, I have made the sacrifices. I have paid the price in many forms. I have missed events with my wife and kids. I have stayed up all night. I have pushed people beyond their comfort zones. I've even embarrassed myself stalking referral sources to get referrals. I've asked for favors that I'd rather not have asked for, and I've twisted arms when I knew that I was really pushing too hard. I've blown through some boundaries. I've crossed some lines. I have felt the sting of it all. The pain, the sacrifices, they are real, and I have gone too far too often. And I will tell you, I regret some of those decisions that I've made on my way from where I was to where I am right now. And I'll tell you, when I searched my memory for stories to tell you to make this point in this podcast today, well, I discovered that I have blocked out many of those memories. Today, thinking this all through, it brought lots of those memories back. And honestly, some of those memories, they still hurt. They are still painful. They are unpleasant. I'd rather not think about them. A lot of them just make me cringe. But here's the thing. The odds are good that if I were faced with these decisions all over again, I would do a lot of it, if not all of it, all over again. And that's not because I enjoyed it. No, far from it. It's because I wanted what I wanted badly enough to pay the price. And that's the lesson that I want you to take away today. For every success, there is a corresponding non-monetary tax of some kind. There is always a tax. There is always a price to pay. And to maintain success, well, you have to gladly pay those taxes. Yes, it's painful. It's uncomfortable. It can be humiliating. It is absolutely exhausting, but that is the price of entry for success. And that is the price of staying in the game. We all want to believe that we can avoid the hard parts. We want to think that if we're strategic enough, efficient enough, that we can dodge the sleepless nights or the uncomfortable favors. But success doesn't work like that. There is always a cost. The only question is whether or not you are willing to pay it. And if you're not, well, that's fine. That's your choice. I understand being unwilling to pay the price, but understand, if you choose not to pay the price, then it's not the market or the clients or the competition that is holding you back. No, it is your unwillingness to pay. The success, it only comes if you pay the tax. Now, I'm not saying this to glorify exhaustion or overextension. Quite the opposite. In fact, the point today is to advise you to be intentional about the price that you're willing to pay. You can manage it to an extent. You can decide which sacrifices you're willing to make and which ones you're not. You can create boundaries. You can make choices that align with your values. You can decide what is worth it. But recognize when you don't pay the price, you don't get the success. It's all trade-offs. But, and this is important, you can't get away without paying something. There is always a tax. And the key here is to understand that every step forward, it comes with its own non-monetary tax. Whether it's time away from your family or the discomfort of self-promotion or the stress of difficult conversations, if you're going to get the success, then you're going to pay. The difference between those who get what they want and those who don't, it isn't about talent or even timing. I suppose those things come into play to some extent, but ultimately, it's about the willingness to pay those taxes, to see the pain as part of the process, not as a sign that something is wrong. You've got to pay the tax. It's so easy to look at someone else's success and envy what they've got, but what you don't see is the toll that they have paid to get there, the nights that they have missed with their family, the personal pride that they have swallowed, the uncomfortable favors that they have asked for. You don't see the taxes that they have paid. All you see is their success. But I am here to tell you the tax, it is always there. For every success, there is a corresponding price. And if you're willing to pay it, you can get exactly what you want. That's your moment of concise advice. Wrapping up from Xi'an, China, thanks for spending a few minutes with me and Ned today. We hope you have a great weekend and an even better week next week. Keep plugging away, moving forward, and getting things done. You're on the right track. You'll get there, I promise. We're all in this together, and together we build better practices through better marketing, better management, and better technology. Until next time, I'm Lee Rosen.
Thanks for listening to Your Law Firm. Subscribe to the Friday File at roseninstitute.com and join thousands of lawyers focused on working on instead of in their practices. You'll find safe, successful, actionable approaches for transforming your firm. Sign up for free at roseninstitute.com